This is Get Real with Bob and Stacy, the show that helps you learn about the mortgage and real estate markets. Get the inside scoop from their expert list of guests and have some fun along the way. Now, here's Bob Gallagher and Stacy Alcorn.
Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real. I'm your host, Bob Gallagher. I'm joined in the studio by co-host Job Torini. And joining us today is our guest host, Jay McHugh. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, Job, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, as you know, Bob, Jay is an owner and partner at Lair Realty Partners. What I want to look at, over the course of the next couple segments is where Jay feels like the local real estate market is headed now that we're, coming out of the fall into the winter. Mm-hmm. What type of inventory levels do we have available? Where the market's best suited? And, what do you think from a buyer's perspective or even a seller's perspective, the most important thing is in terms of looking at selling in this time of year?
Well, certainly getting your ducks in a row is most important. For instance, a lot of buyers who've been looking are starting to see indications that the market has been very hot. Prices have increased dramatically, and they're starting to sit back and say, maybe this is not a great time to buy. On the flip side, you have sellers who are saying, okay, I need to move. I need to move because we're having kids. This is going to happen anyway. So there's a combination of a lot of information out there and how you disseminate that, how you put it into your own plan is what is going to be challenging in 2019 because it's going to be a different market.
Yeah. In terms of watching what you're producing on a yearly basis, I see that you handle all areas of the state. On a statewide basis, do you see any advantages, any counties in terms of more bang for your buck, for lack of a better term?
Norfolk County, Suffolk County, those areas have always been strongholds because of the medical, now the casino coming in, jobs, the commuter rail, all those things do factor into it. There are some pockets that are getting very quiet, because people, again, are reading the news outlets, listening to the news outlets, reading the papers, the media, and everything else. So there is some trepidation out there, and that trepidation is running rampant, whether it's in the mortgage business, the real estate business, in the construction business. People are starting to see people hold back a little bit. It's not as frenzy as it was 18, 24 months ago.
And do you think that's something that may be healthy for us in terms of the long-term participants in the market? Like maybe it's time to take a step back, not like we saw in 2008, but something that's normal. I mean, I think through several cycles, this is my 20th year, sometimes it's healthy, right?
Absolutely. What happens in any of these cycles is you get people who just jump into the market, whether it's, again, the mortgage banking space or the real estate space. They think it's taking in orders and making lots of money. And then you get a lot of people who then start to see there's a lot of work. And then you're going to start to see those folks leave the industry. And it will bring some equilibrium to the industry of the mortgage and the real estate and ancillary businesses. For the near term, it's a matter for people to get as much educated as they can, understanding where is the impetus, where is the momentum, and what one needs to do to make a sale, to get an application, to get through the process so that those particular clients will be happy with the results of choosing you to work with.
Yeah, and I know that you are a relationship marketing expert and also have a business, Send Out Cards. We participate and we use that. Along those lines, in terms of becoming a long-term participant in the market, can you talk about some of the value that Send Out Cards provides and also some of the value that just relationship marketing offers over other types of marketing, conventional media, radio, things like that?
One of the things that I've found over my 30 years is that people count, numbers don't. When you focus on people, you'll have an infinite amount of business. When you focus on numbers, you create what I call cement shoes, and you fall into proverbial bankruptcy. Now, we are competing out there with the Googles, the Zillows, the Trillias, the Bankrate.coms, the promises and gimmicks that are out there with all these messages. If one would take their time to focus on the 200 people that would come to their wake, their funeral, or more importantly, their wedding, they'd be better off working with those raving fans. Unfortunately, you see the inexperience or the people who are just not educating themselves. You see them working with the suspects, the wannabes, the potentials, and it really slows down their ability to service the people who have their hands raised.
Yeah, and it's almost like because the tools are available to get a macro level amount of information, like that's where the focus is. And then when you see companies growth, like from our standpoint at Ross, we're growing just in Massachusetts. I mean, I think that's a better indication of, where you want to go. And actually the advice you want to seek as a consumer is who's doing business locally. And you've seen national comes in. Talk a little bit about that. We understand that at Ross, but what separates Lair, and why do you continue to grow as a team and as a company and as a brand, frankly, when you have so much national competition and so many gimmicks online?
Well, certainly you bring up a good thing in your industry, Quicken Loan as an example. Super good company. You just don't know who you're going to work with, whether it's a pro or rookie. Well, that's great. If you want to test that market out, you're going to be left with good, bad, or indifferent. Whereas someone could go to Ross Mortgage, know exactly who they're working with, get a better level of service, and most likely the same exact pricing as they would working with someone that they did not know. Transfer that to the real estate space, same type of thinking, that we're laser focused on helping our agents and the consumer get the information necessary for them to make the right choices. If we have agents that are happy coming to work, they're going to profess that happiness to their clients, and it all works in concert with one another. The challenge is the shiny little objects that are out there. Everybody's chasing the next particular agent or loan officer and promising a lot of things. Unfortunately, people can promise a lot, but they don't necessarily deliver on that. Yeah. And I think the key that we circle back with all the time is the education. Are people becoming better than they were yesterday? Here at Lair, Local Agents Extraordinary Results, that's our mindset. If you're just sitting and you're not improving, well, you're not good to me. I'd rather see you go somewhere else. And I think you and Ross and Bob and all your staff have done the same thing, as you're taking a strong interest and accelerating your growth patterns, your education patterns, and helping the agents and the consumer, and that's why you've become so successful.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate that. And I think, again, it's a function of a real shift in focus that I've learned this year, too, of fundamentally changing the way that you look at a consumer and taking away looking at things from an East Coast perspective and more what can we do, like you said, in this county, in this branch, and how can you create, real growth from better ideas that, are coming locally. And kind of along those lines, in terms of, I guess, advice that you would give to someone, maybe not out in the business, but outside the business, maybe we'll start with a potential buyer that wants to come in, not interviewing an agent. I think that people kind of have an understanding of what that means, but the level of value that experience brings, because we see the difference here at Ross. We see people come in with buyer representation and not. And it's a real hard road to I'm going to screw that up. Road to hoe. Sorry, Jay. For that consumer. In fact, it's almost to the point where we can't do that. We can't deny a consumer the right to use an agent, but it's automatically, certainly real estate attorneys aren't filling that role. And then the expectation becomes, certainly with some of our younger loan officers, that can happen. It's a real shortcoming. It's a real shortcoming for people, and I don't think they understand all the time when they don't have representation what's not getting looked out for them. Like what are the dangers? Because there's a lot.
Well, speaking into the real estate space, which I think you're leaning towards, when a buyer does come in, they want to know that they can be serviced by you and you're talented and you're educated. Then you have a team of professionals like yourself and law firms and home inspectors that you can direct and refer and endorse and truly help them make those sound decisions. Oftentimes when people start reading and Googling and all this other stuff and they start challenging, say, the real estate agent or the loan officer, that loan officer or real estate agent has to be strong to understand that it's okay, it's common. They're getting all these messages. But how can you counter that? How can you handle that objection? Mm-hmm. I'm very good at it because I study this and I understand that it's very common for someone to question your commission, very common for someone to question your listing price recommendation, very common to question how many homes have you sold in this particular micro zip code. Yeah. And because I've studied that, I can answer that very eloquently by saying, if that's something you're looking for, then I'm not your guy. Yeah. And I get up and leave. And then they'll say, no, come back in. And that's what good professionals can ascertain going forward, is that some of these questions are just being asked because they Googled the top 10 questions. That doesn't mean that they're intimidating you or questioning you. But how does that loan professional or real estate agent handle it? And if you can handle it very well, then you'll have more success. Because, again, we have these national companies that are promising a lot, and we have these zestimates that are confusing the sellers and the buyers, and they need you and I and Ross and Bob and the team of Lair to be able to help them make those sound decisions. Yeah, and it kind of walk in the right path. And part of kind of what you just got into, I know that you take a lot of pride in the fact that you're a mentor to a lot of people in terms of in several industries and relationship marketing. What's the most rewarding
aspect of that for you, serving as a mentor?
It's definitely seeing people succeed in their own space level. For example, there's certain words out there, I'm glad you walked into this, that we teach Ross agents and Lair agents, and I'll go over a few of them. I cannot stand the word honestly. I can't stand the word to be honest with you. I can't stand the word so. I can't stand the word like. Those are filler words. It tells me that someone hasn't prepared well enough or hasn't practiced public speaking well enough to put themselves out there with a pregnant pause rather than filler words that makes you feel or sound inexperienced. Mm-hmm. And when I can share that with an agent or a loan officer and they benefit from that and they smile and they say, you were pretty hardcore, Jay, but now I see the point. And they're watching their own TV broadcasters, listening to sportscasters, and they're hearing this, to be honest with you, Job. Bob, honestly, I think this is a great office. And you start to say, wow, if I'm saying that in a presentation to a seller, to be honest with you, the opposite of to be honest with you is dishonest. That's
a very, Bob and I were on a meeting a week ago, and we had someone say to us probably 50 times 100%. And I laughed and I said, Bob, I don't know much, but I know it's not 100%.
And that's,
it's true. And I've learned that lesson from you so many times.
Very good. And we charge $5 for each time we make those statements. And what happens is that you have the same data as American Mortgage 101. I have the same data as ABC Real Estate. It's how you disseminate that information and how you publicly speak that information. Therefore, we're all performing in front of that buyer and seller or applicant at that particular time. And it's not to mislead them, but it's to showcase a first impression is a lasting impression. And if you're showing them how you would handle a showing or an objection by your strength of public speaking and word knowledge, that is going to separate you in a positive way than the other person coming in for the listing presentation.
Exactly.
And that's where we help our agents to make an understanding that the data is the data. The house that sold for $400 is the same house that Coldwell Bank or Century 21 is going to come in with the same data. How do you disseminate that, and how do you explain why you're going to get their home sold for the best price, least inconvenience, best terms and conditions, while making it a smooth process for them? Now, if you work on that, 2019 will be very good for you. If you don't, and this is what I call winging it, practicing live on a live client, well, that's why you're struggling. And that's the difference between coaching, mentoring, practicing, consistently practicing, having a joke of the day, having a song that you can sing, and your consumer says, yeah, no, you're not just a real guy. You're a really, really cool guy. I want to work with you.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, just off that point, consistency. You talk a lot about consistency. Can we expand on that a little bit? I mean, I think, I have no right to judge your career, but I've seen just from the limited time that I've known you that you are very disciplined and consistent. And I know the message that you bring to the people that you're mentoring is one of consistency. So any way you can expand on the value of that.
Well, I just caught Joe for $5 right there because he said the word so, but we like each other.
Maybe it'll get waived. We'll see.
The consistency factor is very true, that we all have 86,400 seconds in a day. That's not going to change. What you do with those 86,400 seconds in a day is going to determine whether you're successful, if you're average, if you're 10Xing it, or you're struggling it. And how I've learned that is that if I get up at 3:30 or 4:30, which is probably the time when I get up, I get more done before 8 o'clock than most of my peers will get done in 8 hours. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I can work on my public speaking. I can work on my prospecting. I can work on helping and mentoring others. And guess what happens? It sharpens my own skills. Now, move back to appreciation. How many times do people have talked to a person, emailed, texted a person, and they say, Jay, I just don't have time to send them a card? Again, let's go over. It's 86,400 seconds in a day. If I could teach you how you could find that time, would you do it? What is it? That's not what I asked you. And so, $5. I've learned that there's a lot of objections out there because either people are fearful of being successful, and if you're fearful of being successful, you're probably going to be fearful of being consistent. And consistent is building those muscles up to say that after I've talked to someone, I send them a card of thanks, and I keep that consistency, that communication chain going forward. if I want to. If I don't, then that's also a good thing. Then they write them off. But don't live in maybes. Yeses are great. Nos are great. Maybes will burn your business. And that's where people get stuck in the mud. Now, when you go back to consistency, I went into your war room and I see Bob's notes, and those are awesome notes. He's got consistency with his team members, his coaches, his mentors. That's great. How many people have that up on a vision board? They don't. They're winging it. Consistency is the key. What do you do to prep before an open house? What do you do to prep before a listing? Are you pre-launching your listing? Are you setting up a date where if you don't have an offer, then you get a price reduction? Or are you just winging it again? That's what happens with most average agents, is that they're just going quarter to quarter, year to year, not knowing how to swim with the drift currents and so forth, and they get themselves in trouble. So consistency is the key to succeeding in a challenging marketplace.
Yeah, and I think experience obviously is a big part of it. And I know you're very experienced, but one of the things that I want to kind of explore is your ability to stay current with new and efficient ways to do business. One of the first things that I learned from you in some of your video messaging, number one, is the importance of the video message to begin with. And we're going to start some stuff with that with Ross, but also the way that you're saving time and also still valuing the personal experience, but not making it the overall end-all part of a customer transaction when it's going to cost you 6 or 7 hours in a business day and the value of that time.
Correct. For instance, now we have something easy called video conferencing. Zoom's an excellent source. You see people using video to give video messages. I'll use a company that I use, reference them, toot them out. Bomb. 8 years ago, they came to me and I said, you don't have the right technology. It's too much to download, upload, and the receivers might not be able to get it, and it's just potentially a harmful thing to me. Now I look at it and I say, they've got everything that they need. I can do a bomb video. I stay visible to the person. It's human. I can, as an example, I can send a text and say, congratulations, your mortgage has been committed. I can send an email, your mortgage has been committed. If I send a bomb video with my emotion in it, it's going to go a little further, much further. And that's going to cause me to have referrals, testimonials, Zillow reviews, all that wonderfulness. Now, the people who were afraid of that, Gary Vaynerchuk, a good friend of ours, he told me once, 8 years, maybe 10 years ago, he says, Jay, your videos don't need to be Hollywood produced, but they must be produced. I never forgot that. If you look at my video history, I have tens of thousands of videos out there. And I have people still coming to me saying, I can't do videos, Jay. Well, you're 10,000 videos behind me, because if someone's going to Google search me on YouTube, who's going to pop up first? So $5, if one can do a video a day, you'll have 360 videos out there. You'll be 10x, 100x more than your competition. Why are people doing it? What's popular is not always right, and what's right is not always popular. The people who are extraordinary do the extra things that the ordinary are not willing to do, and that's what I've learned over my self-education, my mentors, my Grant Cardones, my 10xing. It's not that difficult just to mirror the people who are successful. You cannot not become successful. The challenge is to begin. You got to begin. You got to start.
Yeah, and stay consistent, obviously. I think we're wrapping up this segment now, so some of what we generally like to do, just kind of get your synopsis of the first and second quarter this year in terms of prices and inventory. And, again, you have a scale of knowledge statewide. A lot of people tune in to listen to what that's going to look like and the perspective out there. So if you could take us through that in maybe a minute and a half.
First quarter, prices were up. People kept saying, is it going to continue? Because of the lack of inventory, obviously it did. All the way till June and July, we were starting to see multiple offers and frustrations, and prices were going through the roof. Come September, it was crickets. Brokers were complaining. Things were sitting. Buyers have left the marketplace. They're sitting on the sideline. Last few weeks, we're starting to hear brokers say that good open house is more activity than expected. Therefore, it is a very challenging going into next quarter. But that's the time when people need to grind. That's the time when people need to practice, get their stuff in order, and be ready to come out January 1, January 2nd, and see what 2019 brings. None of us have a crystal ball. But there's always going to be death, divorce, relationships that move from one coast to another coast. And that's your audience. That's your key window.
Well, thank you, Jay.
Great. Thank you, Jay. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more Get Real after this.